Well, looks like it's just after 12. Go ahead and get started. First off, welcome to Class 5, the final class of the Smart Sewer Program RPR Information Session Workshop. Thanks for attending. With us today, we got Tina Haas, KC Water Smart Sewer Construction Manager, and then Kevin Devoto, Field Operations Manager, to be helping out within this class as well. Quick overview of Class 4. We talked about the resources with the Smart Sewer Public Outreach Team, and then hit on some construction impacts and why RPRs should be aware of how construction impacts nearby business owners and homeowners. Also hit on site and surface restorations, as well as Action Center, which are 311 cases, and kind of process how to get those resolved in the RPR's role in getting those cases closed. Today, Class 5 agenda, we will identify, tracking and potential additional scope work, which is likely time and material tracking. RPR's role in the change management process, which is allowance authorizations, work change directives, and change orders. And then project substantial completion, or AFO, touching on the punch list and the RPR's role in meeting requirements for project final completion. I think end of last week, I did send out the class material for classes 3 and 4. Just shoot me a note if you did not receive that. I've got a pretty long distribution list, so sometimes folks get missed. So if you did not receive that, just shoot me a note and I'll get that sent over to you. So like the last couple sessions, we wanted to start off with interactive polling question. So the first question here is, how can the contractor notify the city or project team of a formal change? You can either look for the word cloud response in the chat, or just feel free to come off of mute and just verbally answer how you feel the contractor should notify the city or project team of formal change.
Right. Shouldn't it be by some kind of written notification?
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly right. Written notification, that's outlined in the general conditions, Article 4. So just make sure if these circumstances come out in the field that there is a follow-up with written communication. I know some circumstances are obviously different, which we'll kind of touch on that through this class, but just want to make everybody aware that yes, a written notification is the correct answer. So that kind of leads us into our next question. As an RPR, if you're out in the field and the contractor mentions that the physical conditions differ from what's identified in the contract documents, what should the RPR's next step be in this situation? So kind of think if it's, if you're kind of in these shoes and this is all kind of happening, going down, like what's the order in which you would kind of handle this particular situation?
Well, you could always ask for a clarification for that particular situation, or if there's more than one physical change, then request for each one of them and the reason why. Some of this falls under the contractor should be aware of site conditions and or any extenuating circumstances before project starts or even bidding operations go, shouldn't they?
Correct. Yeah.
How about on the RPR report that you even if you don't think it's a mod, but you think it could be, shouldn't you recognize it in the field and at least write it on your report?
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of where we're getting at. If most of you are probably aware, like these things obviously each day kind of evolve or change. So if there is a matter that pops up, discuss that with the contractor, either the foreman or the superintendent, but just make sure that they're following up with written notification if they do feel that there is a change that's not outlined in the contract documents. So another good thing to think about is, as you discuss that, follow up with a phone call to the project manager. So that way they're aware that there's a potential change. If it's going to take an RFP or something along those lines, obviously that'll kind of stall out and that process will take shape. But if it's a minor change, just keep everybody in the loop as far as your project managers go. And then probably discuss the details, give them your take on the potential ROM, basically cost impacts or potential time extension. So just wanted to keep that line of communication flowing. So great answers. Okay, so with that, we'll get into some further discussion of additional scope work and tracking of time and materials. So as we discussed with those two last questions, it is important to identify, notify, and document. So identify a potential change, have those discussions with the contractor. And like we stated, notify the project managers that there is a potential for a change. And then I think it was Tim had stated document, go ahead and document, make good documentation within your daily report of those discussions and kind of the situation that's taken shape. A lot of times in an emergency situation, that's where expedited communication with the project manager kind of is very important. And in these situations, a lot of times the repair or fix will turn into time and material work. So the photo here is an example of obviously an emergency situation. There's a old brick sewer that's collapsed. So this would be a time material tracking situation. So you just want to follow up with the PMs and kind of outline your discussions with the contractor and what the path going forward is going to be, and kind of let them weigh in, as that could impact the means of payment, if it's going to be like an allowance authorization, work change directive cost not to exceed, or potential change order. So as we touched on, facilitate the effective communication. RPRs are the first line of defense, and they're very vital, getting ahead of issues and limiting any possible delay. Keep a good paper trail, sequence of events, report the details that are, discussed within your daily report. As you all know, we've kind of touched on that in class 3. And then risk management, limits the exposure to potential loss. The better information and the better that the situation's managed, kind of limits the potential for delays or exposure for cost impacts. Also identify who, what, when, and where. That's in the case of a T&M type situation, which we'll touch on here further in the next slide. And then, record retention. Just keep in mind that everything that you're including in your daily reports could be used for potential backup within the change document, or if these records are needed to be recalled later on in the future, particular details, there's a possibility of that as well. So as we get into time material work, this is obviously work performed for the owner, which was not covered in the original unit prices or schedule of values. It's important to understand the scope of work and how it differs from the base scope, the original work. Typically, this work is agreed on a lump sum price, possibly a cost not to exceed, and then tracking as time and materials. And with time and materials, contractors paid off of the actual costs and direct labor specified within their hourly rates. And also the actual cost of the materials and equipment used cover basically the portion of work that's completed, as well as they'll have their overhead and profit within time materials as well. So as they build these items, you know, you can take their extra work tickets and compare them to the contractor rate sheets, which they are to supply yearly. So it's always good to go ahead and get those sheets, ask for them at the beginning of the project, just in case you do have time material situation that pops up during construction. So this here is just an example of a couple extra work tickets. So you can see, you know, they outline the labor, the hours reported, and then obviously the wages, which I blocked out just for purposes. Don't want to get into each contractor's details, but so you can kind of see the outline here, and then as well as the equipment, the same situation, equipment name, hours of use, and the rates. So you would take these extra work tickets, compare the hours billed to what you've tracked, and then compare the rates to the contractor's rate sheets. And it's also important to track the materials delivered and any subcontractor support for the T&M. So keep that in mind as well. You know, don't wait till the end to try to gather all the material tickets. Could be a situation where you're kind of having to backtrack. This slide here is an example of labor and equipment rate sheets. Again, the prices are blacked out here, but you can see, you know, it goes through each craft and then would specify the rate for each craft. And same with the equipment. So at the end of the day, you know, you would basically refer back to your daily report where you're tracking all the equipment and labor, materials used, sitting down, flipping through the extra work tickets, and you know, falling back on the rates, the labor and equipment rate sheets to verify. And it's also important as you go through the work tickets and review them, if you agree, go ahead and sign the work tickets, as these will be compiled and used for backup for the change document.
Are we going to know, excuse me, are we going to know when we're working on a time and material change order, or is that just going to be, you're kind of figuring that out in the field, or how do we get notified that this is mod work?
So that would be within your discussion with the contractor, and that's part of the purpose of, you know, identifying situations that look different and having those conversations out there in the field. And again, if they feel that there is a change, they need to basically submit that in writing. And you can initially obviously make a call to the project manager that this situation's occurring, but that's how it gets started. We want to avoid situations where the contractor proceeds with work and then after the fact they're coming back and trying to bill for a time material or extra work situation.
But Tom, all of that needs to be priorly approved. It's not something
Right.
that's just approved in the field. The project manager has to be aware. The design professional, project manager, they all need to be in agreement with the project team.
Well, funds have to be procured and also, awarded to that contractor before work gets going too.
Correct. Yeah, everything needs to be priorly approved beforehand. So just make sure that, the project team that knows that this situation is going on, that one of the situations is going on before that work gets started. It can all get documented.
Most of our work is lump sum though, right? When it's initially awarded, unless we get to a modification.
It's project depending. We have several projects that are unit price. And there is a means, as far as time materials go, there is a means through like an allowance authorization or work change directive for the contractor to proceed, but the approval from the project manager, needs to happen before the fact.
Okay. All right.
Some of them are lump sum though. It's just based on the work and the scope. So some might be lump, some might be unit and fall within that scope.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right. With that, we'll discuss change management. I think Kevin Devoto is going to about section here.
All right, change management. Jump to the next slide. So if a situation is going to come up on a job site where we feel that a change is going to be necessary, if there's a certain sequence of events that we would like to see happen, obviously something comes along, we shoot out the request for information. RPRs are having conversations with the contractor. The contractor will issue that RFI to the DP, and then depending on the resolution of that RFI, if it's something that can be just worked out, an RFP can be issued, and then kind of depending on the time sensitivity of the issue, we have a couple avenues to affect that change into the contract, which we'll talk about a little bit more here later on. So, RFIs. So hopefully, throughout conversations with the RPR and the RPR with the DP and the contractor, some of the smaller items can just be addressed in the field. But if the issue can't be addressed in the field, we do have these RFI forms within the contract. They're pretty standardized forms at this point. We try to get the contractors to use the forms that are in the contract and submit it, through the correct avenues. But the idea then is to get a written response to everybody on this, so that if it does need to progress to the next step, it can do so with a paper trail. So on the next slide here, standard RFI workflow. Again, preparation, there's communications in the field where things happen. If it can't be resolved in the field, it flows on into the RFI development, where the RFI is produced, reviewed, submitted, responded to by the design professional, and then returned to the contractor. And if the RFI doesn't resolve the issue, it does need to, we'll initiate the RFP process. So on that note, requests for proposals. So this is where the DP will put together the RFP with information provided, via that RFI and with the RPR and conversations with the contractor. It's our formal request to get pricing from the contractor. So, RP has input on what this can look like, whether we think it needs to be a lump sum bid or a time and material request from the contractor. The input from you guys is going to be important, should be taken into consideration by the design professional. You guys are going to be the ones that are going to be responsible for watching and keeping an eye on these changes as they happen in the field. So if you guys feel it can be tracked appropriately, T&M, we can go that route, or if you feel it makes more sense to go lump sum, we voice your opinion. Hopefully the project team is listening. Request for proposal workflows. We did third. I won't waste everybody's time reading through every single one of these, but it's a pretty standard workflow. through this process. A lot of times in that purple box under negotiation, there'll be a lot of back and forth. It's important to stay on top of that, be involved with the conversations as an RPR as part of that negotiation process. A lot of times that's where things can go off the rails and drag this process out. So make sure we're working collaboratively with everybody to get that information resolved so that we can get through the submittal and into the acceptance of that RFP so that the next step can be initiated. So, which gets us into work change directives and change orders. So once we do have that RFP that's been accepted, we have a couple of different avenues we can go with this. If it's a time sensitive issue and we need to get this and get the contractor working in the field quickly, we can issue a work change directive. Once that work change directive has been issued, it is their work authorization to start working. It does not change the contract scope, but it is their authorization to keep working on or to start working on that scope of work. If it's not something that's time sensitive, we can go through and issue the full change order to the contractor, which would roll up the RFP, the work change directive, whatever vehicle has been used to submit or elicit pricing from the contractor, and this will change the contract scope, and it is something the design professional put together. Hopefully the RPR has some input in reviewing it, making sure everything lines up with what's been discussed in the field and what's been submitted to date. And then it works through that change order process, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. So work change directives. Again, these are used often when things come up that are going to affect the critical path, have time constraints, or getting a lot of information, on that full negotiation process with RFPs can become unreasonable in terms of time. So contractors digging out in the field, they come across something in order to keep working and get those roads back open. We can issue a work change directive, which is their authorization to move forward through the issue. And then we follow that back up with the next steps in this process. The big one on this one is if a work change directive is issued, there needs to be a lot of follow-up between the RPR and the project manager and the design professional to get through RFPs and a full change order expeditiously so that this isn't just hanging out there as an open item. Change orders. This is the official vehicle that we can use, the mechanism within the contracts to allow us to modify it. So this allows us to modify times, costs, schedule, all those things. So once we've collected and gotten the RFPs, work change directives, all that stuff's been worked out, and we have our final resolutions on pricing and time, the design professional, project manager, work together to issue and execute that change order. There's some QA processes that this rolls through to make sure all the information is correct, but that's the last step in this process.
Yeah, a lot of times you'll have potentially a series of work change directives. It's important to note, I guess, as an RPR that if you're reviewing a payment application, contractor cannot bill for a work change directive without it being included on an executed change order. So keep that one. Yeah, keep that in mind.
That's where that expeditious next step comes into place, because most of these guys do want to get paid. So if we issue that work change directive, it's good to follow it up quickly with the change order as quickly as possible.
Yep.
Andrew, this is Rick Kemp. Can I add a couple comments?
Fire away.
A lot of times before while they're working out RFPs, work directives, change orders, there may be work going on that is going to become part of that chain. I know they're not supposed to technically, but in real life, there are some things that may be part of that change order. And so at the moment that things like that are in question, I think it's just incumbent on the RPRs to, over document if you need to, but document it, what's going on.
That goes back to the discussion right before when we started talking about change management. You see these changes, potential
Right.
changes in the field, and the modifications that are being discussed. If work does continue, or something else is happening in the field, the RPRs need to be aware of it, documenting what they're seeing, and trying to collect information that may become pertinent to that RFP, to that change
Right.
order, to that work change directive.
And there's also sometimes changes, the lines are kind of blurred between what's part of the base and what's is the extra work. And so, both could be happening at the same time in the same area. So really trying to define the amount of time that's being spent. We had a recent example on a project where they were going to be tapping a junction box. Tina's familiar with this project, tapping a junction box in an existing VCP pipe, and it turned out it was a formed concrete pipe, not even a precast pipe, that was going to take a lot of extra work to break into. So even though everybody was in agreement that there was some extra work there, they were continuing on, and it was kind of keeping track of what's the extra part of the day and what's part of the base, trying to keep that separate.
And that is a good example, Rick, because I think Tim did a really good job of, making those phone calls to both project managers and then getting Tina out on site and everybody kind of getting on the same page. And at that point, that's when you can kind of hammer down with the project manager, and he'd have a better idea too of the means of potential payment. One thing we didn't touch on, but there is actually a allowance authorization document, and this is a line item on the schedule of values as well. So it's a set aside, a lump sum line item for changes in the field. There is a form that goes along with this, and obviously the project manager needs to approve the work change for the allowance authorization, but there is another means outside of a work change directive or a change order.
And all of these methods, are additional work to what their original scope is. So, with that additional work, just make sure that somehow it's captured as in your daily report.
Yeah, what we want to avoid is just the RPR just observing and then just putting it in his daily report and not making the rest of the team aware at the time that it's happening. So,
and it's also okay for you to be that project representative and ask that question to the contractor. Is this additional work? Is this a part of the scope? That's okay for you guys to ask. I mean, ask that to the contractor. And then if they say yes, well, hey, has this been priorly approved before you're doing it? I mean, so it gets noted out there, because sometimes the contractors will automatically do this, and then they might try to send in that documentation for the additional work. And it's like, wait a minute, we didn't approve this. So, and just getting that communicated as well.
yeah, going back to those discussions with the contractor, and then if they feel it is additional scope, submitting something in writing as such, so we can keep the project managers aware. And this kind of leads in to the next slide here. That's the project change log, which this is a spreadsheet of all potential trends or changes that may occur within a project that the project managers track. And the reason that we're showing this slide, it's not anything that the RPR themselves keep track of or update, but they should keep this in mind as changes and trends occur, to go ahead and let the project managers know, so that way they can input the potential for a change within the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet tracks all the financials of the project, so it tracks contingency remaining, allowance authorization funding remaining, and then any pending work change directives or trends or change orders. So this is a useful tool for the PMs, but on the other side of things, from the RPR side, it's just another example of, as you're seeing potential changes or as changes occur, just let them know so that way they can keep tracking it. This information is also useful for the project managers for their PSR updates that they'll fill out as well. So with that change log, it actually translates to the KC Water Smart Sewer dashboard. So again, that's just another example of why keeping that updated is important, and keeping them, in the loop of these potential trends. We're calling trends potential change items. So, and then providing a ROM of these potential trends or change items. So as these situations occur, keep in mind too, don't let these items linger, like we kind of talked a bit ago. Push for a resolution or have these discussions with the contractor to submit something in writing to help get a resolution, and then actively coordinate with your project team or Smart Sewer PM as these come up. So with that, we'll talk a little bit about project getting to substantial completion, or AFO. So first off, achievement of full operation is when the contractor considers the entire work ready for its intended use. So the outline here is the contractor, once they feel that the project has met substantial completion, they will submit in writing to the design professional of such. This is outlined in the supplementary conditions. So, I would remind, we've had some situations where the contractors needed to be reminded to go ahead and submit for substantial completion in writing. So keep that in mind as your projects are trending towards AFO. Also with AFO, make sure that you're receiving all the post CCTV review, as well as verification testing, and that documentation being archived. So it's obviously for linear projects, it's important to keep up with your post CCTV review. As we hit on a couple of the prior classes, this is a requirement for monthly payment. So keep that in mind as well. And then as you trend towards substantial completion, you'll need to have all the post CCTV reviewed, and this will help you obviously generate your substantial completion punch list as well. So another important item is for each project, look in the supplementary conditions as it outlines the requirements that are to be met for substantial completion. It could be found in paragraph 4.04 of Article 14. It'll basically provide some bullet points on, the overview of the items needed to be completed for the project to be considered substantially complete. Once this process has happened, the DP and city will review the substantial completion request. If they agree, they'll go ahead and proceed with the AFO certificate. There's a snippet there, the certificate there on the bottom right. It's important to go ahead and have your punch list generated, at this time or shortly after the substantial walkthrough, and that it's included in the correspondence of this AFO certificate. So with the substantial completion walkthrough, this will happen after the contractor's request. The project team will schedule a walkthrough with the DP, yourself, the RPR, and the contractor, and city FOM or city representative, and they will outline a map or items to basically walk the site. And they should have a representative sample of each work type. So if you think, obviously, your different project types, let's say an I&I job, for instance, you'd want to lay out a schedule of checking a few manholes that have been cementitious lined, some areas where total line replacements occurred, look at a couple back easement areas where restorations occurred or casting replacements. So you just want to get a good sample of each different type of work type with these walkthroughs. And then during your walkthrough, go ahead and take photos of the additional punch list items that you find. That's important as well. So if you'd like, I can provide an example of just a typical, I guess, walkthrough layout as far as how these are generated for linear projects. So as you come upon substantial completion, a couple takeaways here is, just make sure that you're keeping up with punch list items. These are to be completed in order for the contractor to meet final completion. So if it's you yourself that's verifying completion, just keep that communication with the contractor when they're planning on completing these items, and just verify as they're completed, as you'll need to sign off within the punch list. It's also important, throughout the project, that you keep a rolling punch list. You can kind of provide this as you progress through the project in an effort to, when you get closer to substantial completion, that you don't have this long drawn out 100-item punch list that all of a sudden the contractor needs to take care of in the 60 or 90 days, whichever's in their contract, to reach final completion. So keep that in mind as well. You also don't want to send them a punch list at substantial completion, and then a week or two later after the walkthrough, you notice several other items, and you're just constantly updating the punch list. You want to have a good, comprehensive punch list at the time that you're submitting that over to the contractor. And then lastly, a lot of times as these projects become completed, RPRs are potentially coming off the project or needing to start another project. Just make sure that you have all, your documentation aligned, and keeping whoever's filling in for you kind of aware of punch list and where you're at with getting the project punch list completed. With that, Tina Haas will talk a little bit about post-construction photos and some other items as project trends towards final completion.
Okay, so the post-construction photos, these can actually be turned in after the substantial completion punch list, or kind of go with that punch list. And then these have to all be submitted. These type of documents, as in the post-construction photos and the videos, all need to be done before the final payment. Usually those are collected as the as-builts are getting turned in, and also look through them, review them. If there's something that stands out that looks like it needed to actually, the photo needed to be taken, after the restoration was done, or if the photo was taken too early and it wasn't restored correctly or something, just make sure that gets restored, and then that type of photo gets retaken and submitted as well. So just making sure, the specification, if you need more detail, it is presented in the 1015, and that's the supplemental conditions.
Keep in mind too, as they're submitted, we'll want to go ahead and archive these on eBuilder as well.
And normally they're done through a USB, and that also gets archived with the project folder. All right, so these are some documents that kind of go with smart sewer projects, and it's the water main replacement checklist, and it's the field sign off. So the document on the left is when these projects are with SSP water main inspections. So we'll have to make sure and go through and checklist these items. But if we have engineering inspections crew doing the water main replacement, the checklist, this final inspection checklist is not needed. So this is one of those items that also we just need to collaborate and coordinate and communicate with our engineering staff to who is covering this. And if you just reach out to Kevin, myself, or Drew, we'll be able to get this question answered for you. The document on the left is the water service department. This is when you actually turn in that Mylar, that paper copy, that CD that goes with getting it on our GIS water, GIS system, I should say, because everything is there with the maps. So that's just one of those documents that's needed as you turn in those as-builts, the water main as-builts. Okay. Here is just the record and the documents, information that's needed as getting these turned in. You always want to keep all of your information updated. Hey, they installed this water main to that water main. I mean, we're talking about the field line as-built. So when it comes to your red line for the water main, you'll be doing it just like you do with the other part of the project. So just make sure from station to the station on your daily report, or just on your as-builts themselves, because your field mark prints get scanned and they also get turned in with the project. And then, you just want to make sure that when the contractor is turning in any pay estimates, pay applications, additional work, whatever it may be, make sure it's just noted and you approve those pay applications. And for the schedule of values, make sure you get your initials or you get your signature on there. And then that is the part in which, you sign. And then, those as-built, we got to make sure that they're all accurate, because by the time those as-built, when you review them, you get your first sight on them. When it comes to those Mylars, they have to be redone. We cannot accept Mylars that have misprint on them. So they'll have to be redone in order to be submitted and approved, from that standpoint. So with the water main replacement as-built, I kind of spoke to this on the last slide. You'll need a paper copy, and that's the large set. That's not the mini set or the 3/4 set. It's the large set. And then it's the large set of Mylars. It's a CD, and some computers still have them, some do not. You can check that CD before you actually submit it and make sure it's legible. You can see the electronic version of it. And then just making sure too that the coordinates that are getting submitted, those northerns and eastings, they actually match what the as-built has on it, and for those water main points. That could be a fire hydrant, it could be a valve, it could be, the fittings are all pretty much backfilled, so you won't see those. But when it comes to a fire hydrant or something along those lines, just kind of making sure that they are in the correct location. And they all match that state plane coordinate, the 1983.
So as the project trends towards, received your as-built, obviously the project's hit AFO, punch list has been completed. Per the general conditions, it does specify a final inspection or walkthrough. This is just to verify that all the punch list items have been completed and fulfilled for the project final acceptance. So keep that in mind as well to, if you need to remind the project manager or what have you, that per the general conditions, there is supposed to be a final walkthrough scheduled as well. And this is to happen before the contractor submits final payment. Once that walkthrough has been completed, the last form is the field sign-off form. So this, like we said earlier, is after the punch list is completed, the as-builts have been obtained, and the record drawings have been submitted and accepted by the city. This form is very important. It is supposed to be included on the contractor's final payment application, and there is a signature line for the RPR on this form as well. So if you see this as your project gets close to final completion, that's what exactly this form is outlining. You can see from the snippet here, kind of the template here of the form. It's generated by the DP and sent along to the project manager and the rest of the project team. All right, with that, we'll talk a little bit about record documents. It's like Tina stated before, it's the contractor's responsibility to maintain the working set of as-builts. It should reflect any of the changes to the contract documents, which could include changes to the drawings, any additional change order work, survey information, or any other additional or supplemental information as well. With the contractor's as-built and your as-built as well, the DP will generate the record drawings. It's basically, updated plan set of how the project was constructed. It's important for underground utilities or conditions that have changed from the original plan. This is very vital in the future for efficient maintenance or repair operations in the area. And it also helps identify, how the asset was constructed or what changes may have happened from the original plan. So again, just make sure that as the project proceeds, that the contractor is keeping their as-builts updated. RPR should also have a working set of as-builts as well, or a tracking spreadsheet if it's a linear project, keeping track of any changes from the rehab schedule. Once the project's completed, the contractor should deliver their as-builts for the DP, and like we said, the DP will use this information to compare their records and go ahead and finalize the final set for the record drawing package, which will be submitted to Water Services. With that concludes this class session number 5. First off, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. I know it's sometimes tough to use your lunch hour for these presentations, but we appreciate you attending. I will go ahead and send out this last class session materials later this week. And we'll also have a link to the recordings of the 4 prior classes that we'll send along as well. We also ask just to be on the lookout. We'll probably send an additional feedback survey, and we would appreciate your feedback on any, helpful, ways that we could improve, or if there's other material that you feel like you would like further information on, go ahead and feel free to include that information. So don't hesitate to ask any questions. Feel free to shoot us an email or give us a call. We appreciate your initiative out there in the field on, tackling these issues and keeping track of as things change, obviously, and greatly appreciate your work. So keep up the good work and give us a holler if you need anything else in the meantime.
Do they have any questions? Does anybody have any questions or any comments?
This is Tom. I thought the training was really helpful, and especially for, some of us part-time people. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Looks like Drew has gotten the sessions 1 through 5 can be YouTube, excuse me, on the playlist, and the link is in the chat. Thank you, Drew.
Thanks, Drew. Yeah, and I think the plan was to get.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just sessions 1 through 4. We'll have to get the 5th one uploaded now that it's over. But yeah, go ahead and go to that playlist, and the session 5 will be added to it, so you can keep that link. And I'm sure we'll include it when we send it with the other materials.
Thanks, Drew.
All right. Well, appreciate everyone's attendance, and we will see you guys out in the field, or holler at us if you have any questions or want any specific additional information.
Yep. Have a great day.